Relocating to Kansas City can be stressful, but here are 9 particularly crazy stories of past clients of mine who have relocated here to Kansas City. And I think you can learn a lesson from each one of these crazy stories. I had to get permission from each one of these clients to share because number 9, it ended up with my client going to the emergency room. So stick around for that. The first story comes from the very beginning of my real estate career when I just started helping people relocate here to Kansas City. And this is a story of a person who bought a house without ever stepping foot in it. So I got contacted by this person to help him relocate from Las Vegas to Kansas City. And this person contacted me and he told me, hey, I'm looking for a house in a very particular neighborhood in Kansas City. Here's my budget, and I'm not going to be able to go there before closing. And so I spoke to him and I said, look, one of the things that I definitely don't recommend is you buying a house without ever stepping foot in that house. A lot of the times when you browse houses on Zillow or Realtor.com, or even if I'm sending you direct listings yourself, these pictures are deceiving. Real estate pictures don't tell the whole truth about the condition of the house. One of the things that you need to do is you need to get a house inspection. You need to make sure that your home is inspected before you move into it. You also need to make sure that you step inside the home, because a lot of times, I can't tell you how many times I've shown somebody a home and they walk into a home and they say, wow, this is a lot smaller than I realized. The fisheye lens makes this room seem so much bigger, but it's really a tiny room. You really can't tell until you step into a home if you're going to like it or not. So this person contacted me and he said, look, I don't have time to go to Kansas City. I don't have time to travel. I'm going to need a home. I'm going to move into that home and it's going to be fine. Just take pictures for me. Even though I told him that it wasn't going to be a good idea, he insisted on buying the home that way anyway. And so what I said to him was, I said, look, what I can do is I can set up a FaceTime call or I can set up a Zoom call, and at least we got to go through the home together so that you can see this house without the distortion of the fisheye lens and the real estate photography and all of that. And he said, look, I don't have Zoom, I don't have FaceTime. All I have is my phone that's an Android, and you can send me pictures when you go there and when you walk through. And so I was super uncomfortable in doing this. And in hindsight, honestly, if somebody contacted me like this to buy a home in this fashion, I would probably say, no, we're not going to do it like that. You at least have to be on a video call. You at least have to be able to see the home via video and live action, because these homes look so much different than the way that they're listed. But he insisted. And so I took as many pictures as humanly possible going through these listings, and he finally found a house that he liked, and he said, look, I want this house. Let's make an offer on it. We made an offer on it. We got the offer accepted on the home, and he closed on the home. And he got here, and he absolutely hated the home. My worst nightmare coming true. He walked through and he said, look, it looks so much different than the pictures. I really, really don't like this house. And so we were definitely in a conundrum, because he had moved into a house, already bought it, already signed for it. He had moved into a house that he didn't like. And so the only thing we could really do was to say, look, we can either put the house back on the market and hope that you don't lose a ton of money, or you can just decide to get used to the home and live in it for at least 3 to 5 years, and then maybe at that time we can sell it again, and then maybe at that time we can sell it and you won't lose any money. In fact, you might make a little bit of money. He actually decided on the latter. He decided he was going to stay in the home, and he's still in the home today. The last time I spoke to him and talked to him, getting his permission to use this story for this video, he says, look, at first, I really didn't like this home, but I got used to it. I live in a great neighborhood. I have great relationships with my neighbors. Honestly, I would pick a completely different home than this if we had to go on the home buying process again. However, I'm content enough with this house that I'm going to stay here probably for at least another 3 to 5 years. So good news, happy ending for this client. But the lesson that you need to learn is that if you are looking to purchase a home in Kansas City, you need to be here. There is no way that you could purchase a home intelligently through proxy. I've had some other clients who have purchased a home through video walkthrough, but even at that time, they flew out here to view the home before they closed on it to ensure that they liked the home. Now, there are very particular ways that you can do this. You can turn in what's called a sight unseen addendum that gives you the option to cancel the contract if you don't like the home upon viewing it for any reason at all. And I've had a few clients use the sight unseen addendum. However, I will say that it makes your offer a little bit weaker. So the best advice is that if you're moving to Kansas City and you want to purchase a home, be here for the hunting process. In fact, right now at the time of recording this video, I have 2 separate clients who have flown here to Kansas City, are staying in hotels or renting Airbnbs, and every day we are going to look at a handful of homes. They're seeing it in person, seeing if they actually like this area, seeing if they actually like the home. That's so much to do over video call and over sending pictures, phone pictures back and forth with each other. It is completely impossible to do. So you need to be here in person if you're going to purchase a home here in Kansas City. Speaking of purchasing a home here in Kansas City, that's what myself and my team does. We love helping people just like you who are looking to relocate here to Kansas City, looking to purchase a home to live in for the long term. 816-4MOVE-KC is our number. You can call us, you can text us, you can send us an email, and we will get back to you within a day. We have a whole team of real estate agents ready, willing, and able to help you purchase your home in Kansas City. Give us a call. Even if you're not 100% sure if you're moving to Kansas City, we would love to talk to you about the area and about everything that Kansas City has to offer. 816-4MOVE-KC. Story number 2 happened when I helped a woman relocate here with her daughter from Arizona. Her daughter was going to school in Olathe, where if you don't know where that is, that's in Johnson County, which is basically the southwest part of the Kansas City metro. And she found a home that she wanted to buy in Excelsior Springs. Now, if you don't know anything about the metro, you are going completely diagonal across the metro to live in Excelsior Springs and go to school in Olathe. This woman was retired. Her daughter was about college age, I believe. And she said, look, I don't really have anything else to do except for take my daughter to school in Olathe, enjoy my life in Excelsior Springs, and just kind of relax. I had kind of told her, look, you might want to make sure you map out the distances because Olathe and Excelsior Springs are really, really far apart. And she said, look, I've looked at it. Don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. Now, full disclosure, one of the things that I do regret not asking her in that instance was to say, look, did you map this out during traffic? Did you map this out during rush hour? If you're going to go in the morning, did you map it out during that hour? If you're going to come back in the evening and you're going to go back down and get her, did you map all of this out? And it turns out when she was mapping it out, she wasn't factoring in traffic. When you cut across the metro, you do hit certain chokeholds and certain parts of the metro where you're going to get a ton of traffic. The 435, the 71, these freeways are, especially during the morning hours and during the evening hours, are going to be absolutely packed. And so she bought her house, paid cash in Excelsior Springs, decided to live there. And after about a month, she called me and she said, look, I've made a terrible mistake. We can't keep doing these hour-and-a-half drives all the way across the metro, so I need to put the house up for sale. And it absolutely broke my heart because I kind of felt like maybe I should have just told her, no, a little bit stronger and said, you absolutely do not want to buy a house in Excelsior Springs if you're going to live in Olathe, or if you're going to go to school in Olathe. So the lesson that I think that you can learn from this is that you need to make sure that you're mapping out your commute in all times of the day. Kansas City is not as busy as Los Angeles or Atlanta or New York in terms of traffic, and I have a lot of people here. Somebody who relocated here from Dallas says the traffic here is so much better. However, there still is traffic. It is a major metropolitan area of 2 million people. It is not going to be completely empty, and you're not going to be able to go 65 completely just flying down the road. In fact, right now, the 71 is completely backed up. Because of construction. There's so much construction going on here in Kansas City. It's frustrating, but it's good because our infrastructure is expanding to accommodate people like you moving here, but it is going to add time to your commute. It is not going to be traffic free and just you're going to be able to shoot down the freeway without any traffic. So my advice to you is make sure you map out your commute. If you're not sure, call us. Our team, we live here, so we commute all over the place. In fact, there was 1 month that I drove, I think it was like 6,000 miles on my car. I put 6,000 miles on my car in a month because I was doing showings and listings and just driving around. And so I know the traffic basically at all times of the Kansas City metro, and it's something that I definitely can help you with. So if that lady called again and she said, look, I want to move to Excelsior Springs, but I want to go to school in Olathe, I would have said absolutely not. I can't stop you from doing that, but that is a very, very, very bad idea. So if you want to hear the end of her story, this is what happened. We did end up putting the house on the market. And one person who was interested in the house before, this was back when we had multiple offers on each and every house. One person who was interested in the house before, when we beat them out with our cash offer and we got it, they decided to come back and they bought the house from her. In the end, she did lose a little bit of money, but she did buy a house down in Johnson County, super close to Olathe. After talking to her, she said, yeah, definitely don't make that mistake. Make sure you map out where you need to go, especially during rush hour and these crazy busy times, because if you don't, then you could make a huge mistake in moving here to Kansas City. In this next story, my client almost lost $5,000 of his money. He was relocating here from Austin, Texas, and he was going to buy a home to live in with his mom. He had a pile of cash and wanted to buy a home just straight cash. And he wanted to surprise his mom with this house that he bought. So we were looking and looking and looking. We particularly looked for a home for quite a while for this one. I remember, I think we looked at probably close to 30 or 40 different homes before he picked the one that was just right. We put the offer in, we put an all cash offer, and we got the offer accepted. And so we were celebrating, and he said, look, the only thing that we need to do before closing is I need to bring my mom in order to look at the house to make sure that she signs off, because really this house is for her. We schedule a showing just to kind of walk through the house, and we go in there with his mom, and she walks through, and I remember this very vividly. I remember walking through the front door and kind of looking at her face. I just remember her face kind of like falling flat when she heard that this house was for her. And I remember, she was smiling and she was going to congratulate her son on buying a house. And then when they were like, hey, this house is for you, just the smile just kind of disappeared off her face. And I knew at that time we were going to be in trouble. So what had happened was, after they went home from that showing, I followed up, and sure enough, the mom absolutely hated the house. She couldn't stand the house. She was like, I would never live there. I would never want to step foot in that house. And so I had to go back to my client and say, look, what are we going to do? Are we going to go through with this purchase? Because you are under contract and you could lose your earnest money. You put this big deposit down and you could very much lose it. If you don't know what earnest money is, it's a deposit that you put down when you go under contract for a house, and that deposit basically secures your commitment to that house. Now, you don't lose that deposit. If you do buy that house, it goes towards the down payment. If you don't buy that house and you back out according to the contract, you get that money back. However, if you just decide to change your mind, that's a really, really good way to lose your earnest money. And so one of the things that we had to do was we had to go back to the other agent and we had to beg them, say, look, can we please back out of this contract? Told her the whole situation and basically said, look, client does not want to buy the house. He was wanting to buy it for his mom. I know that we shouldn't have done it this way. These are kind of the facts. Luckily, we were able to negotiate with the other party where they would keep a portion of the earnest money, but we got a majority of it back. And the lesson from this is home buying, you can buy a bouquet of roses or a box of chocolates as a surprise. Okay, that's pretty low stakes, but please do not try to surprise somebody with a home, especially a home that they're going to live in. Now, I know that, cute clip from The Office of, Jim buying Pam a home and she loves it and all that kind of stuff, but really that's not real life. If you're going to purchase a home here in Kansas City, then make sure you know 100% that the home that you're purchasing, all the decision makers are going to be walking through the home. Kind of like that first story of buying a home unseen. You don't want to buy a house for somebody else that they haven't seen. So if you're in this kind of particularly, it's a very strange situation. I do realize that. If you're in this particularly weird situation, just make sure that you walk through and all the people who are making the decisions are going to be making decisions and walking through the home together. Here's a story that I hear a lot from different clients is that they bought too much home or they bought too expensive of a house. And the way that this happens is you find a video like this, or you look on Zillow, or you look on realtor.com, or you look at, the cost of living in Kansas City and you say, oh my gosh, there are homes out there for $300,000. I live in LA and I can't even touch anything for $300,000. And you say, man, it's so wonderful to be able to buy a home for $300,000. And you fall in love with that concept of purchasing a home here in Kansas City, and you go through the pre-approval process. You get the lender to say, yes, you can purchase a home. You come to us, we buy a home, and you move into it. And pretty soon those monthly payments start hitting you and you say, whoa, this is actually a lot more expensive than I thought it would be, because now you're not only just looking at the monthly payment, but you're also having to maintain your home. You're also having to pay taxes. You're having to pay property insurance. You're having to do all these different things that you may not have expected when you first moved here to Kansas City. You thought it would just be easy peasy. I'm just going to buy a home. It's going to be so much cheaper than renting. Now, there are certain people that definitely do need to buy a home here in Kansas City because they've been renting for so long and you need to settle down and plant roots. But for somebody who's just relocating, I would make sure that you are buying well within your budget, because even though you're coming from California where homes are $700,000, $800,000, $900,000, and you can buy a home like that for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 here in Kansas City, you need to make sure you're looking at the taxes. You need to make sure you're taking into account the certain particular flaws that are in homes here in Kansas City, like foundation issues. We have a lot of foundation issues here in Kansas City where the soil kind of shifts and damages foundations, and they erode foundations. And you need to factor all of those things into account. Now, this isn't to say it's not a good idea to buy a home in Kansas City. It may or may not be. This is why you got to call us, and we could talk through whether buying or renting when you move here to Kansas City is going to be right for you. But you don't want to buy too much of a home and really hate it in a year because you're stretching your budget. You're not able to go out to eat. You're not able to do anything because your home payment is way, way too high. So again, make sure you purchase a home that is modestly within your budget. Now, I can't tell you what that budget is. You're going to have to talk to your significant other or your family or whoever, your financial advisor, to come up with a budget that would work for you. But I do see this all the time, especially now when homes are being bid up. Like a home that's listed for $300,000, sometimes they're going to go for $315,000 or $330,000. It's going to get bid up and up and up. And guess what? That's more money out of your pocket. That's more money for your monthly payment. All of that is going to factor into purchasing a home here in Kansas City. So my advice to you to avoid these, circumstances is to just stay well within your budget. Don't buy too much of a home that you can't afford. Okay, so story number 6 was one of the most stressful situations in my real estate career. I had a client who was relocating here from Florida. She was going to retire because a couple of her grandchildren and children had already moved here to Kansas City, and she just wanted to be closer. And so we decided to purchase a townhome, a connected home that was going to fit her needs. It was in a maintenance provided community where she would pay like $150 a month, and they would do the lawns, they would do the snow removal, all of that stuff. She was purchasing this townhome, and she was super happy. And so we said, okay, we're closing next Wednesday, and we need to go through the house and make sure that the house is in the same condition as when we last saw it. She was flying back and forth from Florida, so she couldn't necessarily go back and forth and back and forth. So she said, Jaylenn, why don't you go ahead and you go walk through the home, just make sure everything is shipshape, and make sure that I can sign the closing documents from Florida so that I can complete the purchase of the home. So I call up the listing agent and I say, hey, can I swing by the home and just make sure everything is okay, because she's going to be closing tomorrow in Florida, and I just want to make sure that the home is in tip-top condition for her. So I go into the home, and immediately when I open the door, there's this water kind of dribbling out of the main living area, and I say, uh-oh, this is a big deal. Something's wrong. You never want to see water basically anywhere in a home. So what had happened was the laundry. This was a 2-story condo. The first story was just like the kitchen and the dining room area and a porch. And then the second story had the 2 bedrooms. And also it had a laundry area in between the 2 bedrooms. And so what had happened was when they moved the laundry units out, there was the last thing to go. When they moved the laundry units out, the spigot that was connected to the cold water on the washing machine was so rusted and eroded. When they turned that attachment to release the washer from that cold water spigot, the spigot completely just broke off, and it started spurting water out of that area, and that water started dripping down into the first floor. And so the first floor was completely ruined. All of the insulation was soaked. All of the sheetrock was completely soaked. And so I call her and I say, look, we have an emergency. Do not sign the closing documents. We're going to have to reschedule closing because it basically the whole condo or the whole townhouse has flooded. And it was such a nightmare. I remember, trying to work a solution with the listing agent. Now, you may be wondering what happens in that scenario if a house goes extensive damage in Kansas City before you close on it. What happens, according to the Kansas City contracts, is that the seller is the one responsible for maintaining the home, what we call in its present condition, to make sure that when the buyer purchases a home, it is the same home that they saw when they did the showing and when they did the walkthrough and the inspection. We went to the seller and we said, look, this is unfortunate. Obviously, this is something that was an accident. We're not blaming you or anything like that, but you do need to take care of it. And so the seller hired a company called ServPro here in Kansas City that does like water mitigation. So they had fans in there for the next 2 to 3 weeks, just completely drying everything out. They completely replaced the insulation. They completely replaced the drywall. They replaced the carpet. And so in the end, it kind of ended up being as good of a situation as you could get it. So the lesson that you can learn from this is if you're purchasing a home in Kansas City and you're not here, you need to make sure that your realtor, preferably if you use us, we do a final walkthrough to make sure the home is in the condition that you expect it to be in. When you go through with your inspector, when you go through with your showing, the seller has an obligation to deliver you the property in the same way that you expect it, in the present condition that it is when you're doing the inspection, when you're doing the walkthrough. That's the condition that the property needs to be in when it's delivered to you. And the only way that you can ensure that is if you go to a final walkthrough right before closing. And if something were to happen, you say, look, I'm not buying this house until it is mitigated. I'm not buying this house until everything is to where we need it to be. Okay, so the next story is also a client who relocated from a very warm weather climate. Another client that, just like us, has relocated here from Southern California. He decided to buy a house in Lee's Summit. Lee's Summit is a very attractive location in the Kansas City metro. It is on the Missouri side. It is kind of the southeast side of the metro. It's got good schools. It's relatively safe. It's a very attractive area. So he decided to purchase a house in Lee's Summit, and he moved in. And I think he moved in. It was like September, and he was very, very happy until winter hit. And he called me one day and he said, "Look, I think something's wrong with my house because I cannot get the house to stay warm." And so I went over, and it was actually pretty hot in the house. It was, he set the thermostat up to like 85 degrees. He was sitting there, even though the house was really warm, at least according to my standards, he was sitting there in like a blanket, a sweatshirt, and like a fleece like sweatpants, and he was just freezing, and he could not get warm. And so he said, "Look, do I need to replace the windows? Do I need to replace the insulation?" He was just completely like freaking out. I said, "Look, honestly, what I think this is I think that you've never been in a climate as cold as Kansas City before. That winter, it got down to, it was like negative 12 degrees. It was like that winter where a ton of people, froze in Texas because they weren't prepared for that type of winter." And he had come from Southern California, super sunny Southern California, where it doesn't get below 50 degrees. And if it does get below 50 degrees, people are bundled up like they're going to die. I know, because I was one of those people that if it got below 50 degrees, I would be in like multiple layers, like long underwear, the whole thing. But here's the thing. When you relocate here to Kansas City, like 50 degrees feels kind of balmy, especially if the sun is out. You could be outside in like, a t-shirt and some jeans in 50 degrees. At least my body has gotten acclimated to that. But I think that for my client relocating to Lee's Summit, he was just not used to this type of cold. So my advice to you is, if you're relocating from a warmer climate, I have a lot of people calling me from Southern California. I have a lot of people calling me from Florida. One of the things that I would say to you is, if you're considering relocating here to Kansas City, then travel here during the coldest parts of the year just to check it out. I have had one client who actually traveled here during the coldest week of the year in 2020. I think it was 2024. I think it was this past year. I remember it was the time that the Chiefs were playing the Dolphins in the NFL playoffs, and it was like the third coldest game in NFL history. And he was here during that week. He called me back and he said, "Look, being here during that week made me decide to not move to Kansas City." And honestly, I think that while Kansas City is a wonderful place to live, that's probably the right decision if you can't take at least a week or two of extreme cold temperatures here in Kansas City. I would rather have you do that than relocate here to Kansas City and just be stuck because you bought a house or you signed a lease and you're not able to relocate back to where you came from. Come here during the worst parts of the year. Come here during August, when there's typically a 1 week where it hits triple digits and it's super, super humid. Come here during that week. Yes, it's not going to be fun, but guess what? You're not going to regret it if you decide. If that's the decision, you're not going to regret it if that's a decision-making factor to make sure that you are making the right decision to move here to Kansas City. There are people who have relocated here to Kansas City who have not been here during the coldest time of the year, during the warmest time of the year, and they really regret those decisions. So don't be that person. Come here during the worst weather times of the year and just check it out, because that might change your mind in relocating here to Kansas City. Now, the next story has to do with one of my clients buying a remodeled home. There are a lot of homes here in Kansas City where investors have bought them and completely flipped them and put them back on the market with a complete remodel. Now, one of the things that you need to do if you purchase a home like this, you'll be able to tell if a home is like this because it'll be beautiful. Typically, these investors focus on the kitchen, the bathrooms, they put in new flooring, they put in a fresh coat of paint. However, what they don't do is they don't typically fix the roof. They don't typically fix any large foundation issues. Again, in Kansas City, we do have quite a few homes with foundation issues. And they typically, sometimes they do, but typically they don't fix the components. They don't buy brand new AC or HVAC systems for these houses. A lot of people who are first-time home buyers do end up loving homes like this because they look like they're a fresh remodel. They're nicely staged. They really kind of draw you in. Let me tell you a story of a client who moved into one of these homes and just had thing after thing after thing break. So I had a client who came here from the Bay Area in California. He bought a home that was freshly remodeled, and as soon as he moved in, he had the toilet break. He had the HVAC system go out. He had some leaks in the foundation, and one of the mistakes that he made was he did not get a home inspection. He had worked in construction in San Francisco, and he decided when he moved here, in order to make his offer more competitive, that he would forgo a home inspection. Now, let me say this on tape. I never ever recommend that you forgo a home inspection because it can uncover so many things that you just simply did not know was wrong with the property. And even if you decide to buy the property, the home inspection can give you leverage to negotiate against the seller to make sure the seller either lowers the price of the home, pays some of your closing costs, or fixes some of the issues that you find in the inspection. That's what I would advise, especially if you're not from here and you don't know the condition of these homes. We see thousands of homes here in Kansas City every year, showing them from person to person to person. So we have a lot of experience walking into these houses, but even I would not buy a house without going through a full inspection. Okay, again, stick around to the very end because I will tell a story of a client who did end up in the ER, but we're not quite there yet. This last story is about a client who almost got involved in a lawsuit. It was a crazy, crazy situation. So what happens when you decide to purchase a home and all of a sudden during that contract you decide that you simply can't afford the house? Well, there are a few things that you need to do. You need to back out according to the contract. With the contract, there are certain contingencies that allow you as a buyer to back out. One of my clients, after getting a house under contract, decided that it was way outside his budget to purchase a home. Now, if you remember a few stories ago, I talked about earnest money. It's a deposit that you put down in order to secure your purchase of the house. If you decide to break the contract, the seller typically gets to keep the earnest money. Now, if you decide to back out of the contract in a way that's not specified by the contract, the seller gets to keep your earnest money. However, if you back out of the contract due to one of the contingencies that's built into the contract to allow you to back out of the contract as the buyer, you get that earnest money back. Now, this particular buyer was just backing out because he said, look, I looked at my budget again, and while we can technically afford the home, we really can't afford the home. I have other things I want to do with the money, so I want to back out of this contract. And so we go to the seller, and the seller says, look, we're going to sue you. We're going to sue you because you have a contract to purchase our house at this set amount of time, and you have to do it. The only thing that we could do to prevent the lawsuit was to give them a portion of the earnest money because my client had broken the contract, and I kind of told him, I said, look, once you sign this contract, we are under contract to purchase this house unless these set of things happen. If you find something in the inspection that you don't like, or if something in the appraisal goes wrong, or if something X, Y, and Z, or if you lose your job, that's a way you can back out of the contract. But you can't just back out because you have cold feet. You can't back out because all of a sudden you reworked your numbers and you decided it's not within your budget. You got to do that before you make an offer on a property because the seller can't commit to selling you a house and then all of a sudden you just get cold feet and you change your mind. That's how lawsuits happen. And so the only way that we could get the seller to not file for a lawsuit and to go through this whole process was we had to give him a portion of our earnest money. And you know what? Even talking to that buyer now, he would say, yeah, I was at fault for that. They did actually end up buying a home that was much less than what they originally wanted. All of this to say to prevent this is make sure you do the work beforehand of knowing exactly how much home you can purchase. Going back to that, these buyers who have purchased too much of a home. You need to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row before you reach out to us to help you purchase a home here in Kansas City. If you've already done that, again, give us a call, 816-4MOVE-KC, or if you need help with doing that, we would love to talk to you about all the hidden costs associated with buying a home here in Kansas City. So you stuck around till the end for the story that ended with my client going to the emergency room. It's a kind of funny story, but basically she had moved into the house. She was going all around. She was saying, hey, I'm new in this neighborhood. I'm from Minnesota. Just wanted to meet you. And so one of her neighbors decided, hey, I'm going to welcome her to the neighborhood. So I'm going to bake her a batch of cookies. What they did not tell her was that these cookies did contain nuts that she was very, very allergic to. So I remember calling to check in about 2 weeks after she closed on her home, saying, hey, how are things going? How are you settling into Kansas City? And she said, well, I'm in the emergency room because one of my neighbors brought me a plate of cookies that had these nuts that I was allergic to. I ate them, I scarfed them down without knowing, and now I'm at the emergency room. Now, obviously, that's nobody's fault, except for maybe the neighbor should have disclosed that, hey, if you're allergic to these types of nuts, I don't remember exactly what they were. I think they were either pecans or almonds or peanuts or something like that. The only lesson that you can learn from this is that Midwesterners are friendly. If you move here and you get to know people, you can expect them to bring over a plate of cookies. Just double check to make sure that you're not eating something that you're not supposed to. Now, if you want some more tips and tricks to make your life in Kansas City just a little bit easier, click right here.